Welcome back to this edition of Feeling Good About Spencer. Today I'm wearing my SCA staff shirt, SCA standing of course for Spencer Cable Access. The Cable Access Board of Directors provided the shirts to us because sometimes when we go to a public meeting to videotape what's going on, you want to know who the cameraman is and why he's there. The reason I'm wearing it today is we're going to promote, or try to promote, our own programming a little bit and show you some things that we've done around here in the last several years. 2 years ago, Wayne Proctor did a tour of the studio, show you what we had here. Today we're going to do a new tour with the new station manager. It'll give you a chance to meet our new station manager. We're also going to introduce you to a new program that we're going to start doing. The new program that we're going to be doing involves a man that was a guest on my show of Feeling Good About Spencer a few months back, Marty Sivan, who wrote a journal called Memories. And it's his memories of growing up in Spencer for the last 70 years. We're going to start taping segments of approximately a half an hour each, and we hope to broadcast them on Monday evenings and perhaps some other times. So those of you who are interested in what has happened around town for the last 70 years will have a chance to learn about it from a man who has a very good memory. And I have many times described Marty as the best raconteur or storyteller in the town of Spencer. So if you'll join me, I'll say thank you, Marty, for coming to join us today. I appreciate you coming back for another visit on Feeling Good.
Thank you for inviting me back.
I should point out that the Spencer Exchange Club provided us this flag in the background of the official Spencer, Town of Spencer flag, and we had asked about getting one because I thought it would make a good background for your show. Normally I have a blackboard and an old wood stove in the background of my show, but we thought maybe the Spencer flag was the appropriate background for your memories of Spencer that you'd like to share with us. And you brought a few of them with us today, didn't you?
That's right, and nothing but the best is for the show. What I did tonight was, I'm not going to really go back down Mechanic Street or go take a stroll down Main Street. I perhaps am going to read about some of the people that will perhaps bring memories back to a lot of the older citizens and to some of the newer citizens. They, I'm sure, would like to hear about them. So if I may, I'm going to start right now. Emery DeLongchamp, a lifelong resident of Spencer, on reading my early memories of Mechanic Street, mentioned I had forgot a very important part of the Spencer business scene in the 1930s. Located in the building across the street from where Spencer Pizza is now situated was the establishment of Henry Chu. Mr. Chu ran a Chinese handle shirt laundry. Back in the days before most people had washing machines and drip-dry materials, the well-dressed man would bring his shirts to be washed, starched, and ironed by hand. The total cost to launder a shirt during the Depression years, I would guess, was about 10 cents a shirt. Henry Chu, as I remember, must have led a bleak life. He lived in the back room of his store, and regardless when one passed by his store, he was working. I don't think that he had any friends in town due to the fact that I would assume he spoke very little English, and that he had time for very little else than work. Being the only Asian in Spencer, he was considered different than the people of Spencer. Consequently, many of the children of town used to shout racial slurs as they would pass his shop. One night, Henry Chu locked up his store, walked up Mechanic Street onto Main Street. He got on a short line bus heading for Worcester. Where he went after that, no one knows. He never did return to his laundry in Spencer. The shop had to be unlocked so that people could recover their shirts. It has been over 60 years since Henry Chu, the Chinese laundryman, got on that short line bus headed for Worcester. I am sure that I am not the only old-timer here in Spencer who wonders whatever became of Henry Chu and where he spent his final days.
Yeah. I remember when you were here a few months back, we introduced your journal that you originally wrote it for your own children.
That's correct.
And so they could share some stories or memories that you had long before they were born and when they were very, very young. But actually, a number of other people have read the journal and rather enjoyed your memories enough so that they asked about it and commented about it. And it seemed like a good idea to do my program with you several months ago, but perhaps a separate program on its own.
It was fun, and certainly still is. I still can't keep the journals at home. The people are still calling up, and most of it is from the program, I think. I would say the last time I was on, I said maybe 100 people read them. I'd say now probably 250, 300 people have read them. And I'm constantly working on them. This really is from a new one that I didn't have when I was there before. Shall we do another one?
Sure.
This was an incident that happened back in 1941. It might sound funny today, but I'm sure back then, as you'll see, it was a pretty serious incident. It must have been early in 1941 when Saldini's fruit store was sold to a gentleman who had just arrived in Spencer from Greece. Mike Angelopoulos converted the fruit store that was located on the north side of the Park Movie Theater on Mechanic Street to Mike's Luncheonette. The United States had not actively entered World War II, but the war was in full swing on the European continent. In addition to Mike managing his lunchroom and waiting on the trade, he was assisted by a woman by the name of Mrs. Lillystrom, who waited on the customers in the booths, and my brother Bob, then about 15 years old, working on the counter. Working the grill and doing the short order cooking was a fellow countryman of Mr. Angelopoulos by the name of Charlie. I never did know his last name. In stature and looks, Mike and Charlie were totally opposite. Mike was about 5'2" or 3 inches tall and perhaps weighed 115 or 20 pounds and quite handsome. Charlie was a big man who stood over 6 feet tall and was on the heavy side. Poor Charlie had a terrible set of buck teeth. They protruded so much that he looked like he was constantly smiling, even when there was nothing to smile about. Mike's Luncheonette used to jump with business, especially on Friday and Saturday nights back in the 1940s. My brother Bob told our family the following story one night after returning from his job at Mike's. It was during the period in history that Italian forces under Benito Mussolini had invaded Greece. A CCC worker, that was the Civilian Conservation Corps during the Depression, worker from the camp in North Spencer, and the camp, incidentally, is where the 4-H camp is now.
Oh, really?
In North Spencer, entered the luncheonette and took a seat at the counter. The worker, a big man of Italian extraction, started to tease Mike, saying that Italy was going to whip Greece. I am sure he had no way of knowing that Mike's wife and 2 children were stranded in Greece. Mike Angelopoulos went into a rage as the teasing continued. Remember, Mike was small in stature. He became like a tiger. He flew across the counter at the CCC man. To his surprise, he knocked him off his stool, and to greater surprise, there he was sitting on top of his Italian opponent on the floor of the restaurant. Now that he had the guy down, poor Mike looked up in panic. He realized now that he had this tough guy down on the floor, what was he going to do with him? He looked up at the counter, and there was his short order cook Charlie observing the scene. Mike, in panic, did remember Charlie's teeth and yelled at the top of his lungs, "Bite him, Charlie, bite him." After the war, Mike went back to Greece and brought his wife and 2 children to Spencer. His daughter, Becky, was one of the most beautiful children that I, to this day, have ever seen. I don't remember too much about his son except that his name was Steve. For a while, Mike Angelopoulos lived with his family in a tenement above the luncheonette. He then moved to Worcester and bought a bigger restaurant. Incidentally, I didn't write this. The restaurant was Montrose Dairy. Do you remember Montrose Dairy?
Right.
Mike also bought some apartment buildings and became an American Express success story, not express story. As for Charlie, I used to see him presiding over the grill at Stewart's Diner, still smiling, I think. That's Mike and Charlie.
Yeah.
You remember them?
Very international flavor in the on Mechanic Street. Yeah.
Okay, let's go to High Street.
High Street.
Okay. This one is entitled The Magnolia Tree. And I wrote this last spring. That's why we have a year ago last spring. Today is May 1st, 2001, and the magnolia tree in our side yard is in full bloom. It is a spectacular sight to see, and its aroma just perfumes our property. There is a wonderful story pertaining to this beautiful work of nature. My parents purchased our family home in the spring of 1939. I was 8 years old. I am now a man of 71. The great New England hurricane of 1938 had destroyed most of the trees on the property the previous fall. My father was spending all his spare time that first spring and summer chopping up all the felled trees. He had just finished chopping up the magnolia tree that had blown down on the south side of the house, and he was about to pull up a little sprig from the tree that was sticking up from the ground. As my mother was passing by, she said, "Oh, don't pull that little shoot up. Let's see if it will grow." It did grow. It's now 30 feet high. Its blossoms are a delight to see, and it has perfumed the neighborhood for 62 years. My mother died on April 25th, 1985, at the age of 87. The magnolia tree was in full blossom that day. Both our son Todd and my brother Bob told the story at the funeral of that beautiful tree and how my mother saved it from destruction so long ago. What a fitting monument to a little lady, 4 feet 10 inches tall, with a green thumb.
A good memory for you from her past, but yet it's still there to remind
That's
you.
right, that's right.
You still live in the same house.
And one more year has passed, and it's just spectacular.
Really?
Yeah.
There are so many beautiful things around Spencer, like Howe Park and Luther Hill Park, and so many areas to enjoy the beauty. It's good to have one in your own backyard.
That's right. You know, when you get to Luther Hill Park, before the hurricane of 1938, it was all big pines, and they all blew down.
Right.
And, it must have been about 1941 or 42. Troop 116 of the Boy Scouts, which was at the Congregational Church, replanted all the trees in the park, and those are the trees that are there today.
Oh, really?
George Willey, again, supervised that. He was a forester up at Howe Park at the time, and so when we see these things, I say, gosh, I was 12 years old when we planted those, but they're still there. And remember Ralph Warren?
Yes.
Ralph was the scoutmaster. Give up his vacations every summer to take us to Treasure Valley. And,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Ralph was very active on the Conservation Commission for many years.
That's
so
right.
I'm sure he was glad to see
right.
some trees
He was a
planted.
feel-good about Spencer guy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I like to tell friends about the story of when we went to the dedication of the Ralph Lauren Park out on Wire Village Road, and a friend commented several years later that they had driven by Ralph Lauren Park, and said, well, now, who is that? Is that the Ralph Lauren that I know that lives on Paxton Road? And we said, yes, it is. They said, well, how'd they do that? He's still alive. You don't name a park after somebody while he's still alive.
That's right. Not many people, but if anybody deserved it, Ralph Lauren did.
I think probably Ralph
Wonderful
did.
man. Had met, in fact, I could show you a scar in my knee that when we were at Treasure Valley, I was on a two-man saw with him, and I let go of my end of the saw. But he was quite a guy. Here's a guy that I bet everyone will remember, but everybody over the age of 30. But certainly, I entitled it Popeye. No, not Popeye the Sailor of cartoon fame, but another Popeye. His name, Claire Popeye O'Coin. I would say that most anyone with a background in the town of Spencer who is over the age of 30 most likely would remember the late Popeye O'Coin. Popeye was a boxer. From what I am told, he wasn't all bad. He was in his prime in the ring in the late 1930s and the middle 1940s. Back when Popeye was drawing crowds in Worcester Mechanics Hall and other arenas from Lowell, Massachusetts to Portland and Lewiston, Maine, there was very little regulation of the sport of boxing. He would box all day. He would work all day in the Cleven Shoe Factory and then travel to some arena at night to participate in a boxing match. He would sometimes fight 2 or 3 times weekly. He used to boast that he had over 300 fights to his credit. It stands to reason that you cannot continue to be as foolish as Popeye without some terrible effects. Popeye was becoming punch drunk. At the end of his boxing career, he would still draw crowds. Fans and non-fans would just go to see this poor soul take a beating. It was said in fight circles that no boxer could take the kind of beating and still remain on his feet like Popeye did. By the time I got to know Popeye, he walked as if he was drunk, though he never took an alcoholic drink. He was blind in one eye, and his ears looked like 2 pieces of cauliflower. But that all didn't matter to him. It was all worth it. He was somebody. Every kid and most adults knew and greeted Spencer's famous pugilist. I can remember walking up Main Street with my 2 sons, and they would spot their friend Popeye standing in the corner of Main and Mechanic Street. Todd and Keith would smile, and you could feel the excitement. "Hi, Popeye," they would say. The old pug would put up his fist and sort of play box with the boys. How they loved it. Claire Popeye O'Coin died of the effects of diabetes about 15 years ago. We all go through life and make our mark in different ways. Too bad little boys of today will not get the chance to do a round with Popeye.
Yeah. And I guess he pretty much would put his gloves up for anybody that would
That's
say hello
right.
to him.
All the kids, he'd stand up there in that corner and, "Hi, Popeye," and
They all know
have to
him?
dance around. Yeah. If anybody went to junior high school in Spencer in the 1930s, 1940s, they're going to remember this guy. It was with a great deal of apprehension that I entered David Prouty Junior High School in September of 1942. I had been hearing about Mr. Brogan from the older boys, and they all had stories to tell. If you misbehaved, or for any reason you did not measure up to his standards, you would be invited by him to step out in the hall for, as he called it, a round or 2. I had heard that many a 12-year-old boy had taken him up on the challenge, but none of them had been victorious. Somebody told me that Charlie Kincaid had almost got the best of him, but not quite, and everybody knew that Charlie Kincaid was tough. He came from that family of roofers who had come into Spencer from down south somewhere. When I first entered his classroom that morning so long ago, I could tell just by looking at him that Jimmy Brogan was one tough guy. He was everything the kids that had measured up and made it through junior high unscarred said he was. He was tall and ramrod straight in stature. He had a bulldog face similar to the actor Ernest Borgnine. I don't think we had been in class for 10 minutes the first day when he invited one of the Pelletier twins out in the hall for a round or two. I don't remember if it was Ronald or his twin brother Donald, but whichever twin it was, he respectively declined. I don't know if Mr. Brogan was a good teacher because he didn't do much teaching. He found it more important to tell the students about his exploits in World War I and, of course, his experience as a commander of an infantry company in the Plattsburgh Maneuvers. The Plattsburgh Maneuvers was a large peacetime military exercise held in extreme northeastern New York State shortly before World War II. He also made it known that he most likely wouldn't be our teacher for the complete school year because the United States was now engaged in World War II, and certainly there would be no way the war could be won without the expertise of Captain James Brogan. I found out as time went on that I didn't have anything to worry about. You see, I had an ace in the hole. I told Mr. Brogan that my father had been an infantryman in the Argonne Forest during World War I. And that, I guess, sort of made us fraternity brothers. 2 years passed and I went through junior high and entered high school. The government never did call Jimmy Brogan back into the Army. He never forgave his country for not calling on him, and the Allies won the war without him.
In spite of that.
That's right. The day after I was released from the Army in 1953, I realized that I did not have any civilian clothes that fit me. I went to Worcester in my uniform and purchased a new suit at Kennedy's men's store. I then went next door to the Thon McCann shoe store to buy a pair of shoes. The shoe clerk looked up at me and said, "Sivan!" I recognized that bulldog face. I reached down and shook his hand. "Mr. Brogan, it's good to see you." He replied, "Army. I always knew you would amount to something." I never did think that reaching the rank of private first class was amounting to something. In writing this story, it just dawned on me. I shouldn't have shook Jimmy Brogan's hand that day so many years ago. I should have snapped Captain James Brogan a salute. He would have loved it.
Darn right.
You bet.
Any private should know he should salute a captain. It's a
I'm
good
sure
story.
if anybody's watching this in junior high, they're going to say, you know, that's true. He was, never did teach anything. We,
Really?
had infantry tactics instead of mathematics or something,
Well, it must have helped you. You came back from the Army.
Private first class.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting to hear some stories about people that we may have seen. I remember Popeye O'Coin and miss the color of seeing him on the street.
Oh,
a little
yeah.
bit.
Oh, the fond memories. Here was one of the, I think, just a short, one of the greatest ladies that ever lived in this town. I entitled it Lady Mary.
Lady Mary.
Yeah. My mother and father affectionately called her Lady Mary, and the name did fit her. She has been deceased for over 50 years. Her grave is in the old cemetery behind the Congregational Church. I have met a lot of memorable people in my 71 years. Miss Mary Cruikshank would have to be on top of the list. She was born during the Civil War, the daughter of the Reverend James Cruikshank, minister of the Congregational Church. She was straight out of the Victorian age. She was slender and ramrod straight with high lace collars and wire rim glasses. When she was younger, she had been a companion for wealthy women traveling in Europe and the Middle East. When she related stories of her travels, you almost felt like you were along with her. I can remember when I was a high school freshman, one of my courses was ancient history. For anyone that's watching this with Roland O'Coin, by the way. I asked Miss Cruikshanks if she would talk to our class on her travels in Egypt. I can still picture her, though she was probably in her middle 70s, down on the floor on a prayer rug that she had brought from the Middle East, praying to Allah. She wrote a social column for the Spencer Leader for many years, advising the people of Spencer about all the events taking place, some very important, most just good reading. I could go on forever about this wonderful lady from an era long gone by. The last time I saw Miss Cruikshanks, she was well into her 80s. She was walking down High Street on a snowy winter day. I said to her, "What are you doing out on a day like this?" She answered, "Marty, when I put my feet down, I put them down like I owned the earth." You know she did. A month later, she fell down in her apartment and died from a broken hip. Miss Cruikshanks, I have never forgotten you. One of the greatest ladies there ever in this town.
Yeah. I'm afraid I don't remember her.
She would have been dead, I think. She died in probably about 1955 or some time around there.
Mm-hmm. But your recollection makes me feel like I've met her now. I think it's great that you've spent so much time creating this for your children. Now there are others of us can enjoy it along with them.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that our viewers will enjoy it. Tentatively, we think we'll be broadcasting the program of Your Memories on Monday evenings and probably some other times also. This program is generally on Monday night, so it seemed as though the two kind of went together, something to feel good about in Spencer and some memories of Spencer. Of course, SCA, Spencer Cable Access, that's our purpose, is to promote and live and enjoy Spencer and show the people of town what's going on in government and other things.
There's a lot to tell, and I'll be happy to do it.
It'll be fun.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
I think so.
I'm hoping that by the time some people have seen this program at the end of the month of July, we will have already started your episodes and get some filming done.
We'll do it. Sounds great.
Having you come back and also a tour of the studio today hopefully will encourage some people to take an interest in our operation here. We're all volunteers, but we do have fun. We sometimes refer to this as our playhouse, and a great place to volunteer and maybe do some good along the way.
I'm sure we will.
Well, thanks again for coming by, Marty. We appreciate it.
So happy you invited me back.
If we're going to say it, let's say it right. If you realize that your body doesn't belong to you. Man, I should save this revelation for Friday. Your body doesn't belong to you. It's only loaned to you. Somebody write that down. You are a body on loan. You're already in debt. You want to take yours back? Yeah, you beat it up, brother. Really, your body's on loan to you because your body will not go with you where you're going. Whether heaven or hell, your body will not go with you. Amen. I'm telling you, your body's gonna... Your body is bound to this earth